So, for the bell ringer, of course, we answered the question, what did you learn about terrorism? We put that in the chat. And you finished up the reading from yesterday on terrorism. And the entire reading, the 6 pages, were about that in particular. So today we're going to talk about background to terror in the notes. And we'll finish by going over some information from 9/11 using an EI chart and some videos. But we'll watch all of them together here in class. So if you're at home, of course, you'll need to click on the individual links. But anyway, right now we're on the notes, and hopefully you have gotten the note page open all right. But we just want to cover these topics here. Soviets in Afghanistan, the rise of Al-Qaeda, and previous incidents. So first, let's look at the Soviets and Afghanistan. And that's referring, of course, to this picture here. Between 1979 and 1989, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. Afghanistan is next to the Soviet Union, is to the south. We talked before about how the Soviets want, of course, access to warmer territories and oil and all those other kinds of things. And, of course, the Soviets were also concerned that the United States could have influence in countries neighboring to them, and they didn't want that to happen. So in 1979, they invaded Afghanistan. And a comparative analogy would be it was kind of like what Vietnam was for the United States. It was controversial with their people. It was far away. The locals used a lot of ambush tactics. The Russian military, even though it was powerful, was too formal in order to win there. It was somewhere that wasn't their own home, so they weren't good at fighting there necessarily. And so the war dragged on for a long time, a decade. The United States supported rebels with both finance and weaponry. So the United States, of course, still, even though it's 1979 at this point, the domino theory isn't as popular as it used to be. We're still afraid of countries converting to communism. So we are supporting the rebels with both money, finance, and weaponry. Eventually, the rebels are able to win after this long drawn-out war over a decade. The Soviet Union gives up, and they end up leaving. The problem was, though, is that the United States made a lot of promises to locals. And, of course, once the Soviets left, then we didn't think we needed to really be there either. And so the United States didn't really give a lot of support to the locals once the Soviets ended up vacating the country. Not only that, not only did we fail to give support, but Afghanistan itself had a relatively weak government, depending on local influential people to kind of try to keep things in order. Afghanistan itself is also a large geographic country, just like any other, with large rural areas with very few people in them, mountainous terrain, caves, all kinds of places for people to hide. And so this was an easy place for terrorism to get started in and to remain out of the eyesight of everyone else. There's no powerful government or police to keep them in check. And so terrorists basically prefer Afghanistan to hide, especially in the countryside. The rise of Al-Qaeda is the next one up there, and it's spelled A-L, second word Q-A-E-D-A. Of course, that goes along with this picture of Osama bin Laden. So the first thing I would say about that is it kind of rose out of some of the veterans of that war with the Soviets. So some of the people, not just locals, but others who came into a system from other countries, they fought the Soviets and pushed them out. And some of them would then start to believe that not only the Soviets, but any foreign influence was bad. So some of the first people who started up Al Qaeda were some of those veterans of the Soviet war, including Osama bin Laden. So they started to believe it's bad for the Soviets to be here, it's bad for the Americans to be here, it's bad for anyone of non-Arabic, non-Muslim descent to be involved in whatever is happening. They also would believe and spread conspiracy theories that Christians and Jews were trying to eradicate Islam or pervert it. And so they took typical anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish conspiracies and threw Christians in on top of that, especially if they're from Europe or the United States, believing that they're trying to control everyone or subvert them. Their leadership would also draw on the more extreme elements of Islam, especially from central Saudi Arabia. In central Saudi Arabia, there are some extremely conservative religious people who think that the Quran should be interpreted literally, and they draw on specific verses that Muhammad had used basically to defend Islam, because Muhammad was also a warrior, and so if he felt threatened or anything like that, violence was sometimes used in battle. But these extremists believe that this should be done, of course, in all cases, in order to expel foreigners, in order to get rid of outside influence. So they use some of the extreme elements in the Quran in order to justify their beliefs. And of course, one of those people who did believe in these extremist views that came out of central Saudi Arabia was a Saudi Arabian himself, Osama bin Laden. And Osama bin Laden is spelled O-S-A-M-A. That's O-S-A-M-A. Second word is bin with a lowercase b, B-I-N. B-I-N. And then Laden, which is capital L-A-D-E-N. It's L-A-D-E-N. So Osama bin Laden, and there are actually different spellings of that. You sometimes see Osama spelled with a U at the beginning, for instance. But anyway, he is going to be one of the major organizers of Al Qaeda, helping to get financing for it, for instance, and planning. He's not necessarily the most strategic person. They have other people that plan out things like bombings and stuff like that. He might be involved in some of the bigger ideas, but he's mostly involved in organization. He himself is from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia. And his family, of course, was quite dismayed because they're actually pretty modern. Some of them live in Europe, some of them live in the United States, some of them have gone to American schools. And so they were quite shocked, and they disowned him, cutting him off from their family fortune. And of course, he, being involved in some of those earlier fights with the Soviets, saw Afghanistan as a potential home to hide in and plan and recruit. Because even though they don't like foreign influence, when they say foreign, they mean people from Europe and the United States. What they want are other people that are Arab Muslims, particularly those that are Sunni. We talked about this last week. The Iranian people are Shia Muslim. These guys are Sunni Muslim. So if some Iranians came and said, hey, Osama, we'd like to join Al Qaeda, he would probably say, no, thank you. And that would be that. So they decide to hide in Afghanistan. Perfect for them is another religious group that You're definitely not going to say they're peace-loving people. They definitely are violent themselves, but they're not into the same type of terrorist tactics internationally. They'll use terrorist tactics in Afghanistan, and this organization will be known as the Taliban, which is spelled Taliban. It's Taliban. So it's not the same as Al Qaeda. They'll blow people up at home, but generally not abroad. So they take over Afghanistan, and since they have some of the same conservative, extreme beliefs as Al Qaeda, they kind of get along, and they allow Al Qaeda basically to live in the countryside as long as the Taliban's allowed to govern Afghanistan. They don't have a problem with Al Qaeda being there, and that's why we ended up eventually invading Afghanistan, is because the ruling people, the Taliban, were helping to shield Al Qaeda. So not the same organization, similar but not the same. And the last thing I want to mention is previous incidents. And we often think of Al Qaeda and 9/11, but actually they are engaged in international activity before that. So this last information will be about previous incidents. And I'll mention three things. The first one was the World Trade Center in 1993. A bomb was set off in a subground or below ground garage underneath the World Trade Center. So, 1993. So in the previous decade, 1993, a bomb was set off in an underground garage, which resulted in heavy damage and casualties. That was in 1993. In 1998, Al Qaeda bombed multiple embassies. It's places where we send our ambassadors to have relations with other countries. So in 1998, they bombed multiple embassies in African countries. Now, those incidents actually ended up killing 200 people. Now, some people might wonder, well, how come we didn't go after Osama bin Laden then? Well, we kind of were. Then you might wonder, well, how come we didn't invade a country then like we did after 9/11? Well, the 200 people that were killed were mostly Africans. They weren't Americans. So there wasn't generally the outcry that came after 9/11. And then the third incident was in 2000. USS Cole, which is spelled Cole, the USS Cole was attacked by a suicide bomber. It kind of blew a hole in the side bottom of the ship, causing a lot of damage and also some casualties. So the USS Cole. Now, as you know, many of the bigger ships, they have multiple airtight compartments, so it didn't sink. It just needed a lot of repairs to it. But still, they did kill some of the sailors on board. So with all these incidents happening, of course, we're pursuing Osama bin Laden. And one of the issues that terrorists often use, Hamas uses this in Gaza, for instance, is they hide amongst civilians. So they'll typically park themselves in the middle of villages or apartment buildings or other things like that. Schools, that's right. ISIS, when they were in control in Syria, they actually had an apartment building with, they'd have a layer of civilians and then some of their people and then more civilians and so on. So that, because they know that the United States and other countries don't purposely attack civilians like them, so they use them as shields. And so that's the problem, is Afghanistan is huge, a lot bigger than most people think. I mean, this is hundreds and hundreds of miles across, and especially along the Pakistani border, there's not a lot of police or military, and there's lots of mountains and caves, easy places for people to hide. And it would take a long time. Some people say, well, why don't you just have drones fly over? Well, it would take thousands of drones running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And typically, the terrorists, they know they have a surveillance flight going over at 10 a.m. every 3 days. So they keep track and they know when to hide and when they can come out and so on. So it was pretty difficult. And there was one time when we did have Osama bin Laden pretty close, and there was a similar situation. We were worried about the casualties that would happen amongst the civilian population, because that's one of the problems. If you kill a terrorist, if you end up killing a bunch of other people, all their friends and family are now going to want to be terrorists. So it's difficult sometimes to take those kinds of actions. But those are the notes for today, so you can save that file for the next time. And you will submit that at the end of the week. At the end of the week. And if you click on Home and go back to the Unit 2 module, you will see the Unit 2 9/11 assignment. So if you would click on that, please, the Unit 2 9/11 assignment. Now we'll watch these videos as a class. You can see the EI chart there. You might want to click on that to make sure that it works okay. And you'll be typing in 3 pieces of evidence and 1 interpretation per short video.